A warm welcome to you. My name is Mark Isitt. I'm a journalist. I write on architecture and city planning for Göteborgs-Posten, among others, and I do radio programs nowadays for P4. We have 5 architecture talks, and this is the first one. Later on today at 15:30, 3:30, Tam and Videgård Arkitekter will be up here talking about their exceptional work. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we will have Shuhei Shigematsu, who is the right-hand man of Rem Koolhaas. He's running the OMA office in New York. And we were supposed to have Julien de Smet, the Belgian architect, on at 1 o'clock tomorrow. But unfortunately, Julien has had to rush off to Singapore to attend to a project there. But we're very, very happy to announce that his stand-in is Andreas Martinlöv. Andreas Martinlöv, who is famous for 2 things: producing some of the cheapest apartments ever sold in Sweden, and the absolutely most costly apartment ever sold in Sweden for 104.5 million krona in the building being constructed now opposite Centralstationen here in Stockholm. But before that, tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we have a debate on stage here about the changing face of Stockholm with the always very outspoken critic Claes Britton, and Carolina Kaiser, among others. Carolina Kaiser, who recently stepped down as city architect of Stockholm. So I think that can be enjoyable, even possibly a bit dramatic. So we're looking forward to that. Now, inviting a landscape architect to a furniture fair may seem a bit odd, but I think it's a true sign of the times. We are constantly fed the image of this globalized world, right? The world without any boundaries, and we're trying to desperately fit all these pieces together into the big picture. It's much less nowadays about details and much more about the whole. When we look at we don't look so much at individual pieces of furniture. We rather look at the relationship between the individual pieces of furniture within a room. We don't look so much at individual buildings. We look much more at the space in between the buildings. So I think it's very appropriate to invite a landscape architect to a furniture fair. It's proof of that much more holistic approach to architecture that we have today. This fusion of architecture, landscape architecture and design has always been at the very core of Snøhetta's operation. Snøhetta, which was founded in 1989. It is an approach that has been, as you all know, incredibly successful. Their first competition victory in their first ever competition was the library in Alexandria in Egypt. And that's a slab being pushed down into the ground, making it almost more of a landscape architecture project than it is architecture. Another example is, of course, the opera in Oslo, where you can walk around on the roof of the building. A third example is the Peter Dass Museum outside Oslo, where they've slid the museum into a crevice in the mountain. And a fourth example is Väven, the culture house up in Luleå, which won Snøhetta the Kasper Salin Prize 2014, where it's a huge building and it's white, but it envelopes and embraces the buildings that are, the structures that are existing on the site. So it too becomes almost more of a landscape project than a building. Snøhetta today has over 200 employees. They have offices in Oslo, New York, San Francisco, Singapore, even a tiny office here in Stockholm where they produce graphic design. And the graphic designers are here, hands up. There is one of them, one of the 2. They have 2 founding partners. It's Craig Dykers, an American, and it's Kjetil Thorsen, a Norwegian. And underneath Kjetil and Craig, there are 4 partners. 3 men, 1 woman. 3 architects, one landscape architect, Jenny Osuldsen. Jenny has been working at Snøhetta for 21 years. She started working there immediately after school. She, like most other landscape architects in Norway, went to school in Ås and then went a year to Los Angeles to take her master there. She's been working on the Peter Dass Museum, for example. She's been working on the King Abdul Aziz Culture Center in Saudi Arabia. She's been working on the Zero Emission Building in Larvik in Norway, a project which I know that she will be talking about here. And when Snøhetta got the assignment to design the Memorial Museum on Ground Zero in New York, Jenny rushed over to Manhattan, took the opportunity and became the managing director of the Snøhetta branch there. Jenny, we Swedes can feel a bit proud because Jenny is almost half Swedish, I'd say. She grew up in Kongsvinger, which is very, very close to the Swedish border, very close to Torsby and Arvika. Welcome, Jenny.
Thanks, that was a very long introduction. Oh, you've done
long?
your homework. It's not about me, this is about Snøhetta, and as you can see here, this is Snøhetta, the mountain. 2,286 meters tall. So why is an architect office named after a mountain? It's actually a really silly story. It started with the first office downtown Oslo, where we had the office on a loft, and on the first floor is a really, really brown bar called Dovrehallen, the Hall of Dovre. And Dovre is a main mountain area in Norway, and it has one peak, one mountain on top, and that is Snøhetta. So what's on top of the brown bar? Yes, Snøhetta. So we named after a brown bar and a landscape. That's how it all started. So the offices, main offices in Oslo and New York, and then Matthias and Hanna in Stockholm, 7 people in Innsbruck, 7 people in San Francisco, 1 person in Singapore, and half a person actually in Adelaide in Australia. We have projects all around the world, and it really started to be international from day one. Wanted to be that, and it really started with landscape architects and architects together. Wanted to look into how built structure meet the landscape, meet the site, meet the context. And we say context is really everything. We're doing a lot of competition, which actually takes us worldwide. So these are the 2 main offices. You can see here, this is downtown Oslo, Skur 39. This is 80 Pine Street in New York. So now, of course, we're looking into Google Earth all around the world to find these landscape shapes, to find where we can have new offices. The Oslo office is 1,600 square meters, one open. It used to be a shed with tractors parked in there. And it really reflects the way we work, because we always work in team, interdisciplinary. Architects, landscape architects, interior architects, and graphic design. Trying most of the projects always to have all the discipline together. And it's all about how we share our ideas to work in the teams. And this is Rob, colleagues' drawings of a day at work. So you can say, yeah, maybe it looks like kindergarten with a red and the yellow and the green group, but that's how we wander throughout the day and actually bumping into others, ask what they're doing to share the ideas. Of course, you missed the coffee place, fika, hello. Everybody would have been in that spot if it was real time. So we sit very close to each other, and that's also sharing is everything. And it's also about being singular in the plural to actually give your ideas and expand more. So we figure out this word transpositioning, because we're already interdisciplinary. How can we share our ideas even wider, and how can we actually include the users and the clients into our world of design thinking? So when the theme for the conference is Scandinavia now, I thought, okay, what can I really talk about? No, not so much about the history of Snøhetta, just go briefly into it, but more to actually, what are we working on right now? What are the issues that we meet every day that we have to show? And I think that is part of how we can think I mean, the new Nordic, it's a design trend. We're not so much into trends. When working in architect, it could take 10 or 15 years from the first sketch till it's actually a project is opening. But then LCA, it sounds extremely boring. Life cycle analysis. But it's so important that we have to think about it and how to include that and be inspired of it and try to push the world further to actually think more of the future than just right now. And then the green shift, I really think that's part of everyday life. We can read about it, and a lot of people maybe think it's just something we say. What do we actually do? And how can we contribute? And I think that even the smallest step will help us to lead into the green shift. So one of the things with the transpositioning is actually that we try to invite the people, that specifically clients and the users, to be part of the design process. And we made up this system that we actually make a workshop together, and we use something that we call pictograms, which is actually are just photos, and we tell everybody to say, okay, we're going to work this project together, so what should represent the project and what should not represent the project? And you actually find picture and you talk about it. And then when we found the pictures, not and what should be it, then we go into a process of actually doing it physical. To make a concept physical, we take them into our workshop, because we have a really nice workshop with all kinds of machines, and then actually people that usually not do that, they take a position of being an architect, and we take a position being an artist, or being a client, or thinking of maintenance. So you change positions. And I think that's really important, because you ask different questions, and no questions are stupid. So you can push the project much further, and you got a common ownership to the project. So that's all about being generous. And I think that is so important, that we have to give something extra all the time. We have to push ourselves to not just give the one answer, but it always have more layers. And I think that started all the way back with the library in Alexandria. Because this was a library, a lot of people in Egypt can't read. Why spend so much money on a library that a lot of people can't even get in? Then it's really important to make it totally accessible for everybody that you can enter, and you make a plaza that is open 24/7. Because the client wanted it all to be fenced in, we said, no, you don't. We don't really need the people in there, and there's a lot of poor people, and they shouldn't take part of it. We think that it was really important, and fought for making a plaza that was really open. And it's adjacent, next to the University of Alexandria is right here, to have a direct combination and get into a bridge into the project. And this is the skyline of Alexandria, and you can see the project. Here, part of the skyline, yes, it's more a landscraper than a skyscraper. And how does that affect people? So under the Arabic Spring, we got almost every day emails from Egypt, and they sent us picture. And the students actually were standing hand in hand, holding and was protecting the whole area, the plaza, because they said their ownership into this was so important that none should destroy it. That feels you actually have been able to move the world a little bit further with architecture, which feels really good. The second big project was the opera in Oslo, and the program for that was actually, first Norwegians said, come on, why should we spend so much money on opera? Nobody really cares about, or this tiny part of the population in Norway cares about it. We had so much oil money and we didn't spend it on any culture program, which was really terrible. And in the program, it didn't say anything about any public space or plaza. It said, no, it's just the building, the rest comes afterwards. So we thought that, okay, maybe we should turn this upside down and say that the fifth facade, the roof, should actually become a public plaza that is open 24/7. So if you don't want to go into the opera, you should be able to walk on top of the opera. And maybe somebody also will go indoors. So actually then, to make this a free space that you can walk on like you walk in a landscape, and you can have free concerts. This picture is not from when Justin Bieber were there, because then there were 10,000 screaming teenager girls. So it's an open space, and it's not program. Maybe that was good that it didn't make a program for it, because then we didn't do it. Because I think a lot of public plaza have too much program. You should sit here, you should watch that, you have the litter there. It's a landscape, it's never programmed, but it has all these different kind of slopes and makes it interesting. And then to transform that into actually a new way of making a public realm. And then, of course, people are curious. What is actually happening inside, indoors? And then there are an interior and there are some magic world in the opera and the ballet. And it was the first piece in a very large area that has been transformed into new urban living downtown Oslo. Rapid prototyping. To make models and then actually test out things has always been really important for us. And of course, it's part of the 3D world. Everything that we know can execute and then test out, we can make small models, but how actually to make that come alive? Because that's still a little bit problematic for us. So this 3D model was from our wild reindeer center up in Dovre that we made finished a couple of years ago. And this is our industrial robot that we actually were executing the model for it, and then sent the files over to the fabricator that actually was a boat builder in the western part of Norway, and then it was transported up in the mountain and mounted. It's an exterior and an interior at the same time, and it's actually to frame the view to watch the wild animals. Then you have the comfort indoor, you have a fireplace, and you have the view, and that is actually the project. And then, of course, the animals can be outside and look into the strange creatures that are behind that box that is up there in the landscape. Another prototyping is actually in Lund. It's for the University of Lund. They're making a new synchrotron. Max Lab 4. And it's a really interesting project because Lund decided that they want to make a science city northeast of the existing city. It's a medieval city and you have this wonderful cultural landscape around it, and they want to expand. And they say, what is actually a science city? So this first synchrotron, it's extremely specific, a way you split the light into electrons and you get synchrotron light and you do research out of that. The problem on the site is that it's the flat landscape and the highway E22 is on one side. If you drive over there and hit one stone, that stone will create vibrations in the ground. And you can think, if you're going to split light into electrons, has to be extremely stable. So any kind of vibration was really crucial for the whole project. So actually, we figure out that, of course, classical landscape architecture, cut and fill should go in balance. Everything you dig out, you should reuse on site. All the water runoff has to be used on site. And it's very strict by the municipality in Lund to say that had to be taken care of. So we got a new parameter about the vibrations. The researchers said that the flatter the area, the more vibrations go into the ground. They said the vibration had a wavelength of 10 to 40 meters, pretty big. And then we said, that's fantastic. We can use that as a parameter in our parametric design. This is the site, really flat. We have a ring that we have to protect, 528 meters in circumstance, so it's large. So we said one set of waves that we take for the cut and make a new fill that should go from the tangents, because that's how you take the light out. And then they said the more chaos in the surface, the better, the less the vibration into the ground. So the other set was actually then a spiral. And all together, we made these two shapes of wavy landscape that actually then was created from 10 meters closest to the ring and 40 meters in the longest. We actually took then the 3D model from the Rhino into the bulldozer with a cut. It just moved it over and made then the new fill. And here you can see me driving a bulldozer. Who wouldn't do that if you had the chance? And then you move the earth once. And it's really rapid prototyping on site. And it actually, here you can see how it was executed, also in winter time. And all the shape, and then actually the landscape was much earlier finished than the buildings. And it will actually open, it's already an extension on site, and will open in June this year. Form follows environment. How to talk about to do a green shift. How to actually think about the CO2 print. We have made a couple of projects with this, and this is one of them. It's the Comfort House in Larvik in Norway. And it's actually a combination with the engineers and people that are owning the building industry, and also to show how you actually can execute the different technical issues. So it wasn't really focusing on people living into it, but actually who was the plumber, the electricians, and all that to see on different solutions. And it's all about comfort. What is actually comfort? And what will the future in comfort be? What will be most important for us? So this building has taken everything you can think of to reduce the energy footprint into it. And LCA all the way to look into all the materials to make sure that it's actually producing more energy than it actually takes to make it. So it has a double over everything, sort of. So actually the people that are executing can look into the stone for the wall is very short traveled. And then of course reuse of brick, you have an outdoor indoor situation, how the comfort will be, and all the materials should be breathable and really have a long lifetime span. So actually you see if it can actually be upcycled or recycled, and really try to avoid any kind of downcycling for reuse of materials. Another big project, and really the way we got into this, because we had tried, I would say Snøhetta has not been the best in thinking of these things. Maybe small step, but not really a big issue. But when we got into a research group that actually has both the owners, the contractors, and all the scheme of the engineers, then it started to get real. And also that there were an owner that really wanted it. So Powerhouse and SEB, Zero Emission Buildings, it's a complex that we'll be into since 2010, and we are executing more projects with this aim that it actually will be less footprint after it's made. And it's a 60 years lifespan, so you have to think into the future. And you have all these people working together to actually make the effort to push it further. So you could say for a building, an office building in Trondheim, if it should be the most energy efficient volume, it's actually the big ball. And then you have to look to the solar angle, and it's pretty far up north, so it's not so easy to catch the sunlight, but then actually also use the wind and then make all these environmental parameter issues into the new. And that's actually how make the design and how it looks. And then we have to be clever to find the right materials to make sure that it has the comfort for people to work or live in there. This actually got the regulation. We're now waiting to have the customers that actually will be inside the office building. And existing buildings, I think we really have to see differently how we're going to reuse what we have, not just knock down things. Because just for the concrete work, if you knock down something, it's really hard to get in plus in the end if you don't reuse. This is just outside Oslo. Existing office building that has a status that it's so 1980 that it has to be left with a black facade. So we couldn't do anything with a black facade, the look of it. And it was leaking enormous of energy right up because the insulation was terribly bad. So we said we have to find a new way to actually make the facade. So we took the glass, the black glass facade, reuse it as interior material, and then we looked into a Japanese way, an old traditional Japanese way of actually making a facade. It's burn wood, you burn just the surface of the wood, and then it's no maintenance for a long time. So it creates the color that was needed, but the rest is actually that it's short traveled and it's aspen, so it's a good woodwork. And then this was how it looked interior, really nice and creative way of making an office building. And actually, I would say the drive for the interior was the guys that was working with the ventilation, because how to recreate the ventilation, make that natural ventilation, go all the way up to make generous rooms, and then really the interior architects really work with all the materials. Just for the acoustics, these panels are plastic bottles that is upcycled to a new material that actually do the acoustics. And the vertical element is now the new image of the building. And this has a BREEAM outstanding both in the executing part when you're doing the design and also when it was built, and should sort of be the first in the world that actually managed to reuse a building. I hope there has been 10 or 100 projects after this open that actually can do the same and the same standard. And it's all kinds of energy reusing methods to actually be executed. Okay, old and new cityscapes. How do we then have the existing buildings into a new building and make them have a synergy to work together? This is a project just opened a year ago. It's Ryerson University in Toronto. Ryerson University was really not a high-end university. They were scattered all around town, and they had an old library, and they didn't really have any reading places for the kids. So they said they want to make a learning center. So what is actually a learning center? And this is placed by Yonge Street. It's called the longest street in the world. I think it's like 86 kilometers. And it's kind of not the nicest area, but it's just at the public site. So really to use that first floor, the ground floor, as the most important to attract the students to get in there, and then the extra make everybody to go in there. So it's free for everybody to get in to actually the first floor and even go up. So it's sort of a new type of a library that doesn't have any books, because it's a reading place, it's a social place, it's a place you can sit down and just relax. And it has all these different themes, like this is the beach, so it's just a sloping floor that people can lay down, sit down. It's of course free Wi-Fi, and then make their own way of executing and then start learning. So it's a learning center and interact with other people. And then Kulturveven in Umeå was a very interesting project. Christer Olsson is like the guy from Umeå that wants to give something back to Umeå. And we know in the Scandinavian countries it's not that popular that one rich person gives a lot of money for one purpose. But he really wanted to give something back to Umeå. And it's a combination of a library and a hotel and more and restaurants. And it's part of the city grid. And then the birch tree is really the tree in Umeå, and so the whole facade is actually an interpretation of this like big birch tree standing there interacting with existing buildings and making a new realm, all the way down to the river to activate people specifically on the first floor. This is a project that will open in May. It's SF MoMA, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, an extension. The existing building that was designed by Maria Botto, opened in '94, now need an extension about 16,000 square meters. I think the extension. They said that the existing building has to remain as the main entrance. It's really important. And then you have the historical telephone building in back. And in between there is a tiny site that actually is not a site. So how can you fit anything in here? The thing about the city grid in San Francisco is that you have the big streets and then you have a set of back alleys. And we thought maybe the back alleys is the key here to make a new way to enter this new project. So, of course, 3rd Street should be kept as the front and the main entrance, but how then to almost make a Swiss cheese? The people can enter and go in and out and over and inside the building in all the ways. So we thought that instead of using the whole footprint they gave us, we make a recess. So it has some space in between. You actually also can enter. So in the section, you make people flow through in both directions to get them from the street up in the museum and down again into the alley. So this is part of the renderings, and here is it under construction. So this is really the middle zone. You have the background and you have the foreground, and this is the middle ground that actually now is the new layer of the museum. And it has a green wall in one end to attract people up to the sculpture garden. And this is the rendering, and here is when it's executed in the building phase. And then it has on the first floor, which open to everybody, a very, very large Serra sculpture that is soon on at the site and will be then in the opening in May. This will be a new important way to actually get people to meet at first floor at ground level. Attractions. I think it's really important that we think of attractions. Now we can say that many Maybe all our projects could be attractions, but also sometimes it can be the really tiny projects. And then it could be something different again. So trusting actually presence, to dare to be there, I think it's important. We got a project from, actually 3 small projects from Swarovski, you know, the bling bling glass manufacturer. Last year they were 120 years, amazingly production for such a long time. In Wattens, in just outside Innsbruck, they have actually their factories, and they also have a sort of a showcase, and you can go shopping there. It's a small park that they want to extend in double size, and we got the commission to make a playground and a restaurant and a shoppers only entry. This is the playground. They said, no, you should use crystals in everything you do. We said, maybe we should more be inspired by the crystal and the crystal shape. And I think actually to make the kids be there and not just their mothers buying their new crystals, it's also a way to make people stand and be outdoor and be active. So the play tower actually got a site that was a little bit strange because it was a back of house entry road. So we made an outdoor part and then a bridge over to the tower. That is the tallest building on site. And the tower is very transparent, so you always can see there is somebody in there, and it's actually always the kids playing. So we look into how to actually just do the screening for the sun screening of the windows. And you know, kids always can recognize animals. That's some of the first things they learn to know about the animals. And then Swarovski said, yes, you know, our small glass animals from the 80s will be perfect to put on the screening. So that is a set of graphic design into the silk screen that actually then are executing and make sure that you don't get overheated in there, because it's important for the kids playing. And then it's actually a 5-level play tower that actually should be, it's vertical instead of make it horizontal compared to the outdoor area. And you can actually then say that it's a park and we want a theme for an interior. Because it's all glass, you should see through. So we were looking into fall, because then it's a transition in the landscape. So we were looking into the leaves. I made it really into the pixelations, and then made that part of them, how they made the interior. When the kids come in, they take off their shoes, they get socks on, and then they play all around. And we had some special design made for it. And then we have this play tower. You can go 3 levels up and play, and the kids totally love it. It's from 3 years and up. And we know that people sit too much these days, so really to be active is really important. So I think also they should really have an adult tower to play in the same way, because I think we need to be more in motion. Another small attraction, we were contacted by Aesop, which is a producer of hand creams and soaps, very organic and well thought how they make their products. They have like 2 things that is important for their stores. It should be a sink where you can wash your hands and test out the products, and everything should be displayed on the wall. This was the first shop they would make in Oslo, and we got a commission. It's 66 square meters, so it's really tiny, and when you get in there, it's a totally new atmosphere. Even if it's really, you can see it from the outside, it's part of the dynamics of the urban realm. And we had another commission in Berlin, and then it's all in wood. The Oslo one is in gypsum, and the Berlin one is in oak. And we now have one in Singapore. We'll get one new in Oslo, and I think also one in Adelaide in Australia. So it's really interesting to work with these guys. And then this is another shop. It's a shopping center, a high-class shopping center downtown Oslo, Karl Johans gate. It's called Palais. We didn't do the reconstruction of the whole area, but we got one shop that is called Yme. And the client told us that Yme is a Nordic transsexual phenomenon that used to be in the Nordic religion. I never heard about it, but that should be the name of the new shop. So actually here again, the prototyping is actually 4 stories, and it has direct access from the street. So here also is a CNC milled woodwork on the outside, and then you are dragged up in the vertical part to get people from the shoe department to female to male, and then it's a coffee shop and books on the upper part. Okay. How to talk a little bit about money. Because we know it's all, if the client doesn't want to risk anything, it's harder for us to also be risky. If we have people that really want to go all the way, we want to be there. If the client knows what they said, we want this and this, then you shouldn't ask Snøhetta. But a really interesting thing about money was that the Norwegian bank, they have seen so many architect competitions and said, why shouldn't we make a competition when we're going to do our new banknotes? And then we were really lucky to get in, I think we were one of 5, to make actually the design for the new banknotes in Norway. And the theme was that it has to be the ocean. I mean, the ocean is really all about Norway. We have an extremely long coastline. The colors of the banknotes has to be remain as it is, and the size and everything was all set. So it wasn't really, we couldn't really do whatever we wanted. But then, so we look, and it should not be portraits of any people. They said, no, that's so last year. We really want to use the ocean. That's the theme. So then we were looking into that and the ocean, and we had just pictures on one side. On the other side, we actually worked with the Beaufort scale, the wind scale. And then wind is so much about the ocean to make ripples and to have the waves. So these are the colors, the 50, 100, and then all the way to 1,000 Norwegian kroner. And actually how that is pixelated, because the wind speed also could be set as waves, and then the long wave line to a shorter one. So the shorter pixels is in the 50, and then the long ones here are when the wind speed is at the highest. And the pixelation, you could say, is also part of the visual language that we are using today, with everything that is pixelated. So it created a really beautiful and a totally different pattern of banknotes. And actually, they decided to give us the prize, but not the one what they call the front, which was actually with the ocean. They said that it would give us the backside. And I don't think we have ever had so many people in our social media as when we won this competition, because all over the world said, wow, are the most beautiful banknotes we ever seen. And then of course Martin, as head of the brand design, he was like, money gets much better than architecture. They're interested in money. That's why people are looking for it. So it's all about people, really. And I think one project for that is to talk about the reconstruction of Times Square in New York. It's like the most busiest place in the world, and this is like an everyday, and people from New York, they totally hate it. They say they avoid to get there, they don't want to be there. So how to do a reconstruction? The New Yorker then said, okay, then trying to get back to nature again, and what should this actually be? So for us, it was important to look into a totally overimposed area with so much traffic to actually be able to have people walking. So they closed down Broadway, and 7th Avenue, that's going north to south, will be just one way. So they made a test for 2 years to close off the area, to test out to see if it was less accidents, and then they decided to make a new design for the whole area. And of course, then I made a lot of statistics. So now, actually, it's 49% pedestrian space compared to what it used to be before. Nothing, because we were driving all over. So the sidewalks has been so much bigger, and then of course the vehicle space, it's still there. And how to then make a new plane that it could be accessible for everybody, and it should just be like a carpet. We shouldn't do anything on any of the vertical. And it should be extremely flexible for all the events going on there. And then just to try to get some sort of secondary seating, really, we had to get that in just to sell in that they have to have all the plugins and electricity for the events. The concept is really easy, because when you get up from a subway, it's really hard to orientate yourself when you are to see Broadway, that it's a diagonal crossing over. So it's actually just the 2 directions of the city grid that's made in a row. And then you have these small pucks. It's like coins that actually also are reflecting all the light from the vertical commercials around it. And then it could be turned on to the yoga day, totally changeable, but maybe even more important is actually you can protest there. It's part of the people's mind. And also the people living in New York say that they actually would use Times Square more. They will maybe actually even go to a show because it's turned a totally new atmosphere in the area. Folk, this is also about people and to think long term. Last year we were one of 6 architect firms that works for the new governmental quarters downtown Oslo. And that's because of 22nd of July 2011 we had a really, really tragical terrorist bombing that destroyed the area. And it's the governmental quarter, so how should we make a master plan for that? It's really downtown Oslo. And we were then looking into what is actually important there today and what can we reuse and use in a new way. We could see that the access from north to south was very easy. You just follow the street. But then the east-west was totally blocked. And to make, with all the new security issues that we had to take into the project, we said it should not be locked. It has to be open. It has to be a ground floor. That is important. And then there was the findings. There was a plaza that was already there. So we said we use the existing plaza, we take away all the car traffic, and we then make a new way to go through the governmental quarter to make a new set, a new way of looking into the plaza, going through, take everything away inside the existing building to make that the entry, both for the governmental quarter and to go through all to a new park. To minimize the footprint of all the buildings, yes, they will get tall, but then you get much more at ground and make green mobility all over it. So this is the last project. And that's actually about people again, because we are thinking in the future but we also have to think how we are affected of that. And then we were asked for by Sumtobel to make an annual report. An annual report, you could say, is that really something that's just numbers? But they have for many years made it almost like a design issue. So we were asked, their theme was living the Nordic light. So we looked up the Nordic light and see how that actually affect us where we're living. So we figure out to try to actually find somebody that's living their whole life, and then I mean a really long life. We found 4 people over 100 years that had been living with the Nordic light above the Arctic Circle their whole entire life and how that would affect them. They didn't have electricity when they were born, and for many years. They have been living through 2 world wars, and how that affect us. We know that we will get much more old people. How did that also affect us? How do we plan for that? So Åsne Seierstad and Bo Tidholm, they were interviewing 4 people. Åsne, 2 Norwegian, and Bo, 2 Swedes. And then we had a photographer, Sølve Sundbo, to take pictures and a 3D scanning. So then we have these people that actually were telling their story, how it was to live there. They were actually just telling about their everyday life and how that affected them. And we have made these fantastic photos. These 4 people, how they have been living, how they actually are part of being a person living in Scandinavia. And then we were asked to make an exhibition in Berlin at EDIS, and we said we should use these pictures. We made a 3D scanning into 1:1. We had the photos 3 by 4 meters. They're so sharp that inside the eye you can see Sølve, the photographer, in there because it's fantastic. And they're telling the story about the Nordic light and how that actually affects us. And we made a live camera 24/7 that you always can look into the Nordic life, how it is at Marie's place. And Maria, she was over 100 years, and she asked her son, I can't read English, so I don't really know what they wrote about me. Do you think you can get the text? And of course, he called on to Snøhetta, and we sent it right away so he could read it for her. And she was quiet and said, yes, it's okay. It's my life. And she died the same day. They read her story in the funeral. So I think that's the whole lifespan. And to think of that, we're just humans. And how can we then affect that into the everyday life? Because that's maybe the most important. Yes, there's a lot of new things going on and big events, but maybe the everyday magic is the most important. And then it's really important to remember to have fun. Liberating laughter, I think it can create so many good ideas. And I think that's my last word. To end up here, we still want to go out in the world making new projects. And I think it's really the attention to think of how we can affect the future and be responsible for that. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Let's have a seat. Thank you very much, Jenny. Can you hear us all right? There used to be a time, you know, when Norwegian architecture was absolutely horrible. And Swedish architecture was just so much better. Do you remember that time? It's hard to remember now, isn't it? What happened?
Yes, that's not, maybe not, it's not one answer, I'm for sure. But I would say Norway always look up to Sweden as the big brother, and we've been the small brother. And then maybe we got a lot of confidence when we got the oil. Maybe too much, I would say, over the top even. And I think also to rethink that. But then maybe they were more willing to be experimental and take risks.
Yeah.
And the consensus community wasn't that strong in Norway. So we always somebody said, no, maybe we can try this and test out.
You were like English chefs. You had everything to win and nothing to lose.
True. Because it was not, as you said, it wasn't that much to lose. So why not test out something new?
Yeah. How many of the projects that you showed here are a result of a competition, do you think?
Oh, I didn't check anything. But I mean, most or a lot of our projects are competitions. And we say we win 1 of 10, which means that we lose a lot.
Are you happy with that figure?
Of course, we would love to win every project. But of course, not every project is good. And I think that is also part of the process. We have to work in a process.
But would you love to win every project? Wouldn't winning every project mean that you were just too you know, didn't have your own idea about things?
You know, I'm not scared that that would happen anyway. Because, I mean, again, since we are a big collaboration of people, and there's actually the team that decides, there will always be really different opinions in the office. So I think, I mean, it could be the jury, it could be the client, it could be that we actually do something totally not or out of scope. So in a way, I understand your questions. And I think I agree with you, because we have to be hungry and we want to be risk-taking, and then we have to be out there to do that. But I would be fantastic for 1 year actually win at least half of the competitions.
That's what Gert Vingård does, I think. Every other competition is won, or every third maybe. White wins every other competition, and they're very happy about that. But that doesn't make them the best architects, right? Necessarily.
As you said, the Norwegian architecture is maybe more fun.
How democratic is the workplace in Oslo?
I think it's very democratic. I mean, I really, really often get this question because I said, no, I'm sure there are somebody that come in and say that, no, redo this. But really, it is the teams that decides. And there is not like, when you were asking me about being a partner, and you know, that's not an issue. It's not important, because it's really the way we work, and it's about sharing the ideas. So, of course, some of the bigger competitions, there will always be somebody there that makes sure. But we can be really arguing about a project. So it's really, we have to convince each other that this is the way to go.
Yes, okay. And this constellation that you have, where there are 3, 4, 5 men and 1 woman. 5 architects, 1 landscape architect. What do you bring to the table?
Stockholm Design Talks. Yeah. Again, it's everybody sharing into that. So I mean,
but you must have something in particular, don't you, with your different background and your sex?
Yeah, I think. I mean, from the beginning, it was actually more landscape architects than architects. That started Snøhetta. And then, of course, it got much more into architecture. In '95, we got the interior architect. And 5 years ago, we got the graphic designers. And I think that all together really always adds in.
But isn't it like when you sit down around the table, the guys, because there are only guys apart from you, turn to you and say, Jenny, come on, work your magic on this. And what is that magic? Why are you one of the partners?
The magic is always in between. It's never. It's so often when we sit and do a project, because I would say we maybe spend more time actually in the concept phase than probably a lot of other offices are doing. And I think there's so often that I can't remember who actually got the idea.
No.
Because you get something to the table and then you keep on going and then you start laughing and then you're totally out to something different and then suddenly it's there. And you can't remember who actually did that magic, but then it's the ownership and to execute that. Because if the team doesn't believe it, who else would believe in it?
Being a woman in architecture, good or bad? Very simply put question.
I think it's sad that we have to talk about which sex you are, because I don't think that's important, again, what you bring to the table. But, of course, I agree with you. Why there are so many more men that you see in the front page, I think it's sad, because I think there's so many females or transsexuals or any kind of sex out there that is important for the field to push it further. So that's why I am really happy that we are named after a landscape and not after a person.
Yes, that's good. And working with the King Abdulaziz project in Saudi Arabia, what was that like? You were responsible for the landscape architecture there.
It was extremely interesting, and we had big discussions in the office before entering the competition, because we said, how can we work in a country that religion is so extreme? Can we even travel? Because we're 50-50 men and women in the office. Can we even travel there? What about the gay people in the office? Will they get home? Is it dangerous to be there? But for the program of that specific project was so good that it can make a difference. It's the first public cinema ever in Saudi Arabia. It's one of the first public libraries. You probably can't find any book you would like in there, but still, it's a big children discovery zone. It's a very, very large park. So the program was so important for us that we thought that if we can make a part of this project, we actually can help them to push. I mean, we had a discussion in the office because 5 people from Aramco, which is the client, were in the office for a year. 1 female and 4 men. And I mean, they were like, okay, in an auditorium, of course, then we need to have the wall in bin and men and the female on the outs. And we said, you want to make a difference? There should be no wall. Toilets, even to have female and male toilets on the same level in the building was impossible. Now it's almost the same entry. So actually using architecture to do changes, I really believe in that.
One final question. While working with the King Abdulaziz project, you also worked on the Memorial Museum on Ground Zero. That was an incredibly complex project. It went on and on and on and on. It is realized now.
Yes.
Yeah. Which type of country is the easiest to create progressive architecture in? Democracy or dictatorship?
With what we have been working in? Again, it depends on the client. I would say when we open hopefully at the end of the year or beginning of next year, the King Abdulaziz project, it's totally outstanding and amazing. We were 53 people at the most working on the project, and your question, we had a possibility to make things we never ever could have done other places. But on the other side, to have a more democratic process, of course, we didn't talk with the end users because they didn't even know who that would be. So to work in a democratic process like for Times Square, we do hundreds of meetings with people, but that maybe gets more consensus than actually the dictatorship. So I think if you have a really good dictator that thinks democratic, maybe you can do the most. But I think it's really from project to project. So it's a challenge.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming and listen.